So human beings are very interesting creatures in terms of our brains. We have about 4 of them. We have a very, very ancient and completely perfect reptile brain. It is a stimulus response mechanism. It learns by associating this with this. This occurs, boom. They become one thing. They become a unitary thing. That part of us doesn't think, doesn't talk, doesn't have a voice, doesn't have a speech center. It does not have an identity. It does not have an I am. It is an association machine. It associates these things with these things. And the driver for it, the thing it's here to do, is to ensure physical continuation, physical survival. That's what it's good at, and that's the only thing it does. Right? So if we put a reptilian brain into a reptilian creature, it's doing just fine. Because at no point in its reptile life does it have to pause and begin to journal. Am I fulfilled? Is there a is my inner lizard really being expressed fully? Doesn't have to worry about stuff. It only pays attention to a couple of things that it can eat, and things that can eat it, and the possibility of making baby lizards, right? These are the 3 big things it's really good at. On top of that, Mother Nature has added in what's called the paleo-mammalian brain, the old mammal brain. It's a lot like the reptile brain, but it's a bit more sensitive. It's like it's harder to sneak up on a deer in the forest than it is to sneak up on a lizard on the sidewalk, right? Their sensitivities are more broad spectrum, and they have emotion. These mammalian creatures have emotions that reptiles don't seem to have, right? Maybe reptiles do have deep emotions, but we don't know what they are. But it's pretty obvious that there are fear states and driver states and all kinds of responses in the paleo-mammalian brain. Emotional life, right? That sits on top of computations about survival, right? And then there's a primate brain. If you put your hand kind of on the back of your head there, just about everything that's back there is primate brain. And that's obviously, just based on the name, the brain of high primates. It's a brain that excels in group dynamics. It excels in evaluations about status and belonging. Not that that can't go on lower down in the list of creature development, but nobody does belonging and dominance quite as well as high primates. And then there's our human brain. Now everyone has frontal lobes. If you put your hand over the front of your head, just about everything it covers is frontal lobes. And right here in the very front, this is the newest part of the brain, right there in the very, 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 very front, there's an area of prefrontal lobes, like way up front. And this is the most human part of us. This is the part where, in conjunction with everything else simultaneously, we generate our experience of I am. The fact that we are us, the experience of being us. So all of these brains are working all of the time. There's a classic illustration of how it happens. If somebody walks into Starbucks, and as they're waiting in line and looking about, and they see their sweetie sitting at one of those little Starbucks tables with their sweetie's previous sweetie, right? All of these brains function simultaneously, all right? Now, the driver states for lower down in our neurology are basically organized around survival and fear. And the driver experiences the emotions, the sensations that we value most when we're being most secure and generous in our humanness. These are more about belonging and love. Not a survival-based belonging where if I'm not in the pack I will die, but a kind of generous desire to participate in the lives of people, in the lives of other humans. So, there we are in Starbucks. The reptile brain fires up, and in a kind of an emotionless way, it wants to do only one thing, which is to eliminate the rival. As they say in mafia movies, it ain't personal, it's business. Right? The paleo-mammalian brain wouldn't mind getting really furious and maybe causing some serious commotion. The primate brain is computing, well, primate dominance dynamics and interactional consequences, which is to say, it's computing, if I go attack this person, what are the cops going to do? Now, the very front here, the prefrontals, which are the people who observe this beautifully, observe it hooked into the heart center. That part of us just wants to improve communication for everyone. All right? Now, all four of those brains are firing off simultaneously. So we have these drives and urges and impulses, and then the evaluation of them, and it works its way up, and eventually we take a breath and we say, "Ristretto ventilate, please," and we hope we haven't been noticed, right? There's a thing about the reptile mammalian brain. When we put those two things together, around here we call that the creature brain, the critter brain. And the thing about it is, it doesn't really have an I am, as I mentioned. Its driver is basically fear and survival. This is what's important to it. And as we have, well, we don't just have its legacy, we have it right here. It's right there in our heads. Occasionally people will say, when I work with clients, someone once in a while will come in and say, I want to get rid of my monkey brain or my lizard brain. That always sounds very awful to me. So I can suggest, well, let's open up the back of your head, get an ice cream scoop, a couple little scoops, maybe 2.5 scoops, boom, it's gone, and you're dead, right? We cannot be human without these brains. They are not a problem. They're not malfunctioning. They're not indications of shortcoming or failure. They're doing their job beautifully. Whoever designed being human has a really great sense of humor, because they seem to have said, well, let's take this fear-driven critter brain, and we'll put this love-driven human awareness up on top, and we won't really hook them up all that well. So they'll be in conflict with each other a lot of the time, or so it will seem. And then let's turn the humans loose to find out what happens, right? How do they work this out? And we're all in the process of working this out. Really good NLP is an extension of that process of working this out. Our own form of it, transformational NLP, is, I think, an even more important and lovely extension of that, but I'll come back to that later. So all four brains are working all the time. The survival-driven creature brain, what it values is continued heartbeat, blood pressure, respiration, and so forth. That's its success indicator. That brain doesn't talk, it doesn't have a voice, but if it did, it would only have a couple of questions. Well, really one main question. And that question is, are we dead yet? Right? And if we are not dead yet, then whatever it's doing is working. Right? We have to kind of just take a bit of a breath and notice that for that brain, whatever we are experiencing is regarded as a success by that part of us. And I'm talking now, physical tissue, that part of us. Whatever we're experiencing, if we are continuing to be here and to breathe and be alive, it's working. And there's a very, 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 very interesting thing that we discovered a long, long time ago about that brain. And that's that whatever it encounters really early in its development, whatever it encounters that is terrifying or life-threatening, or threatens to create a condition of being cast out or excluded such that we will perish. Anyway, whatever it encounters, that it learns to adapt to, that it learns to survive, whatever that is, then becomes part of the beautiful patterning for continued survival. The way I say that more succinctly is, whatever we learn to survive becomes necessary for continued survival. Now, the way that plays out for humans, and it's an interesting, fascinating, and almost unfortunate but necessary aspect of being human. If, for example, a little kid learns to survive a whole lot of shame in the family, the I am of them, here and here, can make all kinds of decisions about themselves. I am worthless, I am not worth having around, maybe it would be better if I weren't here, all of these very unfortunate decisions that kids make. Their creature brain doesn't understand, doesn't care about any of that, right? For a creature brain, it has neighbors that live upstairs that are always talking and discussing. You can't quite hear them, but it doesn't speak their language anyway. For a creature brain, this experience called shame, the pain of that, the separation of that becomes labeled as useful for survival. And then what happens is, we grow up, we leave the house, we go out into the world, and the next thing we know, we're going to work for or getting in a relationship with people who know the choreography of shame, who can do it with us instinctively, right? We repeat the patterning again and again and again. It's one of the most demoralizing aspects of being human, is that our neurology, our brains are designed to continue whatever it is we most never want to experience again. That's really confusing. That gets in people's way. They think there is something wrong with them. What we've discovered is there's nothing wrong with them. Their patterning is working beautifully. Their brain's working beautifully. Their whole system is generating experience stably and beautifully. Although they may have been in shame-based relationships their whole lives, they've never once died. They felt shame to death, but they've never once died. So their human is confused and heartbroken. Their critter is going, yes, this is excellent, but it doesn't think, okay? So it doesn't actually have those words. This is very hard on us. It's hard on our hearts. It's hard on our morale. The thing that distinguishes really good neurolinguistic programming from conventional coaching or conventional psychotherapy or conventional anything, right? Influence-based anything. Like your personal coach attempts to wedge you into a format whereby you will be accountable for what you commit yourself to do, right? That's content-based leverage. That can be useful, but that's just sets us up to have to defeat part of ourselves in the service of another part of ourselves. What really good NLP can do, it's an analogy, but we can plug a keyboard into that part of our brain. Maybe someday that will be quite literal. I imagine that time's not too far away, but we can plug a keyboard into that part of our brain. That part of our brain does not respond to discussion. That part of our brain does not respond to the good feelings that come from a lot of interaction with other human beings about it. The human part of us responds to the sharing. The human part of us responds to the being understood and seen and accepted. Our critter brain, not so much. So the critter brain will continue to run its patterning. Most especially, the things it knows will never create a problem, in the sense of will never lead to body death. And that list, unfortunately, is a list of really, really negative experiences that didn't produce death. So with NLP, in addition to talking about things, which we generally do, especially in our form of it, we plug in a keyboard there and we can notice what the patterning is. We can sort of really gently and elegantly backspace it out and replace it with something else. Because we're communicating with that brain. We're speaking English or whatever language we're using as we're talking with someone, but what's going on behind the scenes, and every once in a while right in the foreground, is this business of this endeavor to reprogram the creature neurology. so that it labels happiness and well-being as being survivable. So that it has a bias toward good feeling, meaning survival, versus bad feeling that doesn't kill us, meaning survival. It is one of the main differences, and I can't even begin to say I was stunned and overjoyed and amazed when I got that, when I noticed that that's what this stuff NLP can do. That really beautiful spiritual work doesn't do, that really lovely talk therapy doesn't do, that nice accountability coaching doesn't come close to. Yeah? With really good NLP, we can revise our patterning so we don't have to defeat it. We revise it so it serves us instead of becoming something we have to overcome in the service of something else that we value.